Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, February 13th, 2025, and today we're going to talk planting peas and then interplanting with peas, farming with kids and then interplanting with kids. And by that, I just mean some critical infrastructure for raising kids on a farm. So let's do it. All right. Well, good Thursday to you all. Here at the top, I wanted to shout out the episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast that went up this week with host Mimi Castile interviewing Peter Allen of Mastodon Valley Farm. Peter and his partner are doing all sorts of interesting stuff up there in Wisconsin with rotational grazing and restoration ecology. If that piqued your interest like it did mine, it's worth a listen. Linked it in the show notes for you, so check that out. All right, so we've had a sick kid this week, or actually now a couple, which probably describes a lot of you as well. It's that time of year. And I thought I would take today to talk about raising kids on the farm and how we've kind of chosen to go about it. There is no one right way to do this, and our kids are still relatively young, so I can really only observe what we've done and not necessarily advise. But one thing I noticed a lot as I was doing interviews for the No-Till Market Garden podcast over the years was there were not many children of farmers in my interviews. Most of the farmers I was interviewing, almost all of them, were first-generation farmers, and second-generation farmers I interviewed, by and large, had good experiences on the farm growing up. And it's an important point because a lot of the folks I would meet who grew up on farms but weren't farming often said the same thing. I never thought I would come back to farming. I hated it growing up. And to be clear, some of them stayed away from farming because of that experience and just started small backyard gardens instead because they missed the flavors of homegrown food, but not the farm life. According to the National Institute of Food and Agriculture / the USDA, quote, an estimated 70% of U.S. farmland will change hands in the next 20 years, but many family operations do not have a next generation skilled in or willing to continue farming, end quote. However, you may assume my reaction to all of this is, so what did these farmers do wrong? But that's not it. My reaction is kind of twofold. Kids seemingly don't want to do something later in life that isn't fun and enjoyable when they're young. And two, it's perhaps a bit unfair to expect kids to take over the family farm, to take over our dream, as it were. Let's start with the point one. First, if farming is not enjoyable for them as a kid, why would they want to do it as an adult? We see this a lot in sports, and bear with me, parents turn the sport that their kid plays or that they're good at into a job very early on in their lives so that by the time that they are in their mid to late teens, that kid no longer wants to do it. The majority of children drop out of sports by the time they're 13. It's just not fun anymore. It's work. The same sort of thing happens in farming. Parents sometimes focus on the chores and the hard stuff, and kids get older only to realize that there are less difficult things to do out in the world. Even stuff you can do outside that isn't so difficult and stressful. If they have no sentimental attachment to the job, it's going to be hard to convince them to want to do it later. To the second point, why do we assume kids should want to do what we wanted to do and put that pressure on them? We chose farming. They can choose what they want to do. Too often kids are not treated like the individuals that they are. And if you remember being a kid and then being a teen, you probably remember not enjoying people telling you what to do or what to love or who to hang out with or whatever it was. Kids, small as they are individuals. And as such, in our opinion, should be given the opportunity to choose what they want to do with their lives. So in terms of how both of those things relate to farming and parenting, our aim is to make the farm somewhere that the kids enjoy being and somewhere they see value in. Our hope is not that they will take over the farm one day, but rather that they won't rule farming out or rule out taking over the farm. We want them to know that farming is an option, and we don't want them to run away from it. To do that, we don't force them to do really anything on the farm. Not really. We will at times ask them for their help, and they oblige. They will often come out while I'm working and ask if they can help, and I encourage them and teach them. I want them to have gardening skills, even if they don't grow up to be market gardeners. And one of them loves helping more than the other, and that's fine. Sometimes I hire them to seed things and require them to finish the full job to impart that important element of work ethic, and they do. And notably, the one who doesn't love the farm work as much loves the earning Legos from seeding part a lot. So anyway, different personalities. But we don't force them and we don't make it painful or difficult or stressful. We want them to see the value of work, and we want them to understand when you start a job, you finish it. We just don't want to force them to start and finish the job they hate. We try to make it fun. That's an important word, fun. We want them to associate this place with enjoyment. I loved being outside as a kid. I loved food. I remember in my first year interning, I kept smelling this really familiar smell, and I couldn't quite place it. Then I realized one day what it was. It was the smell of my childhood, of being outdoors, of effectively freedom. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I spent all of my time outdoors in the woods running around playing. But farming made sense for me as an adult for those little nibbles of nostalgia, for how much it reminded me of things I loved growing up. We also want the kids to associate the farm with economy. As they get into high school, they will need jobs, and we'd be delighted if they would use the farm to earn money. Now, I want to be clear, I'm a 12-year-old man with 2 kids who are not teenagers yet. So I'm not judging how others raise their kids, because who knows how my kids will turn out. Just sharing our philosophy based on what we've learned and what I experienced growing up and what we've kind of gleaned from our mentors that we've had in farming, plus trying to apply that. The crux of it is make it enjoyable, and there is at least a small chance those kids will return to farming. Make it unenjoyable, and there's a likely chance they stay away. Also, like with sports, often the parents forget that these are the best times in your life too, and it's okay to just go out and play with your kid and have fun where you are, not make it a job, but just breathe it all in. Like our youngest kid, he excels at soccer and loves it, but I don't make him do drills. I go and play with him, and we invent games he enjoys that also make him better at the game. If he wants to increasingly play at a higher and higher level, he will have to buckle down and do the labor later. Developing that love of the sport and enjoyment of it is, in my opinion, how you plant that seed for the child to want to do that work. Because one day they may grow up to be high-level athletes or farmers or whatever, but they may not. Either way, you can't get that time back. If nothing else, when it comes to farming, maybe if they enjoy it, but don't go on to take over or start a farm, they'll come back and help you out sometimes, just to hang, which sounds awesome. Anyways, let me know your thoughts or feelings about raising farm kids. Surely some of you were raised on a farm, and I'd be curious to know how your parents did or did not make returning attractive to you. Anyway, up next, let's get a question about interplanting with peas for a fun change of pace. BRB.
Don't just be wandering, going in the cover crop then. I guess I won't be there.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to be in the field growing food for my community, not creating elaborate pack lists, not writing newsletters or responding to emails, not designing and maintaining web stores, and etc. And I especially don't enjoy doing those things after an already full and fulfilling day of growing food. Actually, if I spent less time on my phone and behind the computer, that would be great. If only there were a solution for that. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for farmers. With one single platform, Farmhand enables you to offload your administrative tasks, send and manage communications, and sell more to your customers. Farmhand saves growers an average of 6 hours of administrative load each week. That's 6 hours so you can get back into the field, spend more time with friends or family, or have a life outside of the farm, which is actually a thing. Think about it. What would you do with an extra 6 hours a week? Sign up for a free trial with the link in the show notes, because now is the best time to dial in those systems for the next growing season. Follow the Farmhand link in the show notes to learn more. All right, back to the show.
If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Does the show bring you $2 worth of value every month? $5? Consider chipping in. I try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Alexandra Powell, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. Thanks for the amazing show. I'm wondering if you've had any experience planting other crops alongside a pea crop. I'm planning to grow several rows of peas for the first time this year with 1 row per 30-inch bed. I'd like to fit some radish, beet, and lettuce crops along the side as there seems to be enough space. Have you ever tried this, and did you have any success? Thanks," end quote. Okay, so this is a fun question, and certainly a timely one, as peas can go in the ground like pretty much any time here in Kentucky. I haven't grown peas in a while because we just don't have a great market for them, and they're not the most profitable thing, even if they are incredibly delicious. That said, interplanting can help bring up the value of those beds, especially if you're just doing one row on a 30-inch bed. There's a lot of wasted space there. So I'm all for it. First, here's how I typically would grow peas to start, and then I can talk about the interplanting element. For both shelling and snap peas, both of which are delicious, it's the same process for me. A day or two before planting, I soak the peas overnight at room temperature in a compost extract just to get those good microbes in there, but also to prime the seed for planting. I then dump the compost extract out and let it drain. I then fill the container a couple times a day over the next day or so just to keep the seeds moist. After the second day, you may see germs, and you definitely want to go ahead and plant at that point. If using a legume inoculant, coat the seeds before you sow them. Just kind of rub that legume inoculant all over them. On a small scale, dig a roughly 2-inch deep by 3-inch wide pea furrow down the middle of the bed and try to dump the seeds at roughly 2 inches apart in a thick band down the middle of the furrow. It does not have to be exact. Or you can also use the jumbo pea plate for the soaked peas, and I'm talking about on the earthway seeder, to be more efficient. I like getting them that soaking jump start just in case an advantageous creature, like a mole or a vole or whatever, finds the furrow and goes bananas on the free food. Better to give the peas a chance. Sorry, that was not intentional, but yes, better to give the peas a chance to outrun the damage. Anyway, all that to say, it is at that point that you can interplant some stuff like lettuce, radishes, as you mentioned, beets, or spinach. I would suggest transplanting most of those things, except for the radishes, which are super fast, but transplanting most of them because the peas will grow faster in the cold weather and rapidly take over the bed. So you kind of want to have those things already started and then transplant them, again, except for the radishes. Also, make sure to add just a little bit of extra fertilizing compost or whatever your nitrogen source may be so the crops don't fight with each other. Yes, even if the peas are getting some of their nitrogen through their root nodules, it does not hurt in the beginning to ensure everyone is getting the proper nitrogen they need, in my experience. Don't go too bonkers on planting here, though. A single row of lettuce or beets or spinach or radishes on either side on a 30-inch bed is doable, or 2 rows if on each side for wider beds, for those of you like me who are using like 48-inch beds. For the radishes, you could do a really thick band, so like 2 inches, maybe like 2 rows, really close together. I like radishes because I do prefer something that is going to come out of the ground because once the peas take over the bed, the sunlight is going to be tough to come by, and some stuff will slow down or stop growing and simply be in the way. That said, as long as you get a good first cutting and the peas are doing fine, then you have a nice little ground cover of spinach hanging out. It may work in your favor to just have the plants there, even if the harvest slows down. Some of this will depend on the type of peas that you're using. Like bush varieties, the ones that don't need the trellis, won't be as shady as trellis varieties, but trellis varieties won't take up as much width, as much space as the bush varieties. And not trellising is my preference whenever I can manage to not trellis something, just because it's extra work. I will say I often prefer the flavor of most trellis varieties of peas and beans, but that doesn't mean I've tried all bush varieties, and many of the ones I've tried are delicious. As for the trellising, I have tried the Hortonova like plastic netting you can get many years ago, and you can get a few years out of it if you're extremely careful rolling it up. But that is the quintessential type of plastic that will end up in the landfill or the ocean. So it's not my favorite. Chicken wire or fencing is better, is perhaps a better option, as you can reuse it for many years, at least in theory, as long as you don't get it too tangled. I usually place the fencing a few inches off the ground so that at the end of their season, I can weed whack underneath them to kind of just kill them back and cut them off. And then it makes that trellis a lot easier to take up. And usually coming out of the ground, the peas don't have any trouble with their tendrils finding the trellis. If you have to train them a little bit, that's all right too, because taking down that trellis is way more work. Anyway, there's my pea breakdown with a side of interplanting, and I hope it answers your question. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's discuss some critical kid infrastructure on the farm. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Growsmart. Curious if your soil will be ready for planting this spring? Growsmart can help you find out with their at-home soil tests. They'll ship it right to your door. Just send it back with your prepaid shipping and you'll have your lab results in just 2 business days. Their reports are simple with tailored seasonal recommendations for fertilizers and amendments. Order now at growsmart.com and use the code DAILY for 10% off. That's DAILY. Begin your soil prep now for a great spring with Growsmart. All right, back to the show. All right, so I took the first part of this episode to talk about our general philosophy to farming with kids. Now, the how. Because here's the thing. Philosophy aside, kids are around a lot and kids need stuff to do a lot. Otherwise, you will get nothing done. So here are some tips and tricks we've learned over the years that make a difference or have been helpful to us. Now, without question, every kid is different. So I can only share what has worked for us, and I can't promise it will work for you. Let's start with babies and toddlers. Babies and toddlers are babies and toddlers. There is not much that can be done to occupy them for any amount of time. At certain times of the year or at certain times of the day, you can wear them in a carrier, but as soon as it gets hot, you obviously got to stop for both of you. Oftentimes, this takes one parent out of the picture for large stretches of times. I mean, really like whole years. People ask us often how to do this job with young kids, and there's just no easy way to answer it. You just kind of have to figure it out and expect it to be hard. Help is a big help. Help could mean family or possibly a friend or someone else with kids who is willing to let the children play while you work in exchange for veggies or flowers or beef or whatever. Then maybe you take turns watching the kids and let them work for a little while. Everybody benefits from a little bit of a break. We left a farm we loved because it was too far from family and we needed help. So shouts to the kids' awesome grandparents. So people are an important factor. Our kids as toddlers love stuff they could push around. Old cedars, small bed rollers, kid mowers, kid wheelbarrows, stuff, anything they could push. They also like to dig. We found having some less sharp trowels and kid-sized hoes around is a good way to allow the kids to imitate what you're doing. Also just enabling them to pretend they are doing what you're doing in general. I used to give our oldest kid seeds and let him make his own soil blocks. He would do that for quite a long time. I mean, who doesn't love playing in the dirt? I literally do it professionally. I'm not going to judge them for it. Then came the trampoline. This poor thing is arguably the greatest tool we have on our farm in terms of infrastructure. Nothing has occupied our children more. They will spend hours wrestling and jumping and playing games on that thing. For us, it was a massive game changer. And if I can find the link to the one that we have, I'll put it in the show notes. Also, I know, and also shouts to the grandparents who bought it. Also, I know that having two kids is not in the cards for everyone, but having two kids has been big for us, especially given that our oldest is as social as he is. Two kids was hard as all get out at first. Absolutely. But now they are kind of the best of friends when they are not the worst of enemies. And having that built-in playmate has taken a lot of the weight off of us to find things for them to do. Now, the one thing some parents will take issue with that we do is that we allow them a lot of TV access. Not to YouTube or video games or whatever, but just to kids' TV. And what we've found is that, sure, some days they watch a little bit too much TV, but they often are quite self-regulating. As weather permits, they will spend most of their time outdoors, or they'll, alternatively, if it's raining or something, they're going to spend a lot of time like playing with Legos or playing their own games or board games or just running around the house. Again, this is not a judgment, but they do not have phones. Instead, they are allowed 30 minutes a day each of video game time on a very boring tablet. If they are here all day, like on the weekends, we will give them a second turn, but we really do regulate any close face screen time because there is absolutely no self-regulation with that stuff. Cell phones are addictive and well-crafted to be so, and the kids would play games on a phone until they passed out if they could, and then get up and do it again. But our theory with giving them a small amount of game time is that it's fair. It keeps them connected to the other kids around them, and it gives them a little bit of something they enjoy instead of just like restricting it so that when they get out of the house, they go bananas. We don't want that. We want them to have a responsible relationship to games and the phone and those sorts of things. And it's honestly worked pretty well so far. Plus, it gives us something that we can take away if need be, which sometimes need be happens. They are also in school now, which we homeschooled for a long time, but found that our oldest is just too social for that. So we found a school we liked and they love it. Anyway, there is no one right way to raise a kid. And I think it's helpful to hear how others do it, or at least it has been for us. And I think it's important to not cast judgments because we need different types of kids raised in different types of ways. Diversity is as important in personalities as it is in ecologies. In that way, feel free to add your insight in the comments section. I know that I could talk all day about this particular subject, so maybe I'll reserve more farming with kid details for later segments. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up there. But before we get out of here, I want to give one last shout out to the good folks over at Rimmel Greenhouses for making this possible. So Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. No, this feels pretty natural at this point. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Big thanks to all of our show sponsors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music. Probably bobbing my head in beat. No idea. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of February, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Lars Kroom. Good. I do not have enough Lars in our following, so thanks for signing up, Lars. You're awesome. And Biggest Floof. Also don't have enough Biggest Floofs in our following, but good on you all. So this is a very easy story because these are medicinal herb farmers in Appalachia who are, they're kind of like on an adventure, they farm like ginseng and black cohosh and those sorts of things. But anyway, they're out on an adventure and they find, they're kind of deep in the woods. They follow this trail of like all these different interesting medicinal herbs they hadn't realized were there. And they're getting deeper and deeper into Appalachia. And they discover this village that had gone undiscovered for potentially hundreds of years. People were working there, working in the old styles, and they were completely unaware of any sort of societal changes. So, and their language is English, but it's like a very different dialect of English. And so anyway, they start communicating and talking to this village, and they learn a lot of interesting things. And in fact, maybe my favorite detail is that they think the airplanes are birds that are carried by giant fairies, which I think is worth investigating. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching and/or listening. We will see you on tomorrow. Probably not the right preposition there, but on tomorrow. All right. Bye.